Hey, it's Brooks with Finch University, and today I got a tech support question in regards to slide gates. And prior to working on an automatic slide gate and diagnosing the electromechanical, the electronic, the electrical part of the gate operator, for you homeowners out there that are having a qualified technician come to your house, for you gate operator technicians that are working on this, and for anybody else having to work around gates when mechanically there's issues that are going on and a slide gate that's chain driven, and you can kind of make this and simulate it to a track type system, a rack and pinion system, or like on the green machines, high security with the slide on there. You can simulate it to that because you'll still have some of the same principles, but what I want you to focus on are things that roll. And the primary things that I see when I'm out there diagnosing mechanical issues with a slide gate, meaning it's too hard to pull, it's too hard to push, and I'm looking at what obstructions are in the way. Is there something on the track that's causing this? Is it just in one spot? Is it a continuous spot? I'm actually using my eyes and my ears. Funny enough, just for as a side note, just for you technicians out there, sometimes taste is involved as well too, because if a battery has exploded, in diagnosing, not necessarily in this problem that we have that we're going to deal with today, but sometimes taste is involved as well too. So you use all your senses. If you've had a battery explode or you have a motor burning, sometimes you can actually taste that in the air as well as smell it. And in those cases, no touch, but in general, when we're pulling on the gate, touch is a part of that. So in this case, we're going to talk about R3. And what is R3 when we're talking about a slide gate that has cantilever, that has roller wheels, that has guide rollers, and a roller chain? Well, it has to do with all of those R's, the three R's that I want you to take a look at. Now, these are not the only thing, but these are the things that are critical right off the bat that you have to address. Any one of these that are adding additional resistance to where you can't just push on the slide gate, you want to address those first. If you've got a bad spot in the chain, depending upon how long the gate operators have or have not been used, you may want to replace the whole chain as opposed to that one bad kink. And then for you guys, maybe another video, if you guys are interested in the chain part of it, just put it in the comments and I'll do another video on roller chain. It's actually pretty interesting, and there's a very easy way to test that qualified technicians can do in just a matter of minutes. But in this case, what we're talking about is R3. And I'm going to use my senses to observe what's going on with the gate operator, whether it's not moving, whether it's making a lot of noise, whether there's grinding, popping, clicking, something that's unusual that possibly is preventing the gate from doing this. For the most part, walk up to the gate operator and lean on it. And if that gate does not move, you might have some problems that you need to address with R3. So let's take a look at the first one and some common failure points and how to replace it. So roller wheels. Now when I'm talking about roller wheels, I'm talking about the V-groove wheels for the most part that are on the bottom of the gate. In general, for commercial, light commercial and residential, I like a sealed bearing type wheel as opposed to a wheel that can be greased and maintained. They both work just fine. One's a little bit more expensive, and in theory, the sealed bearing wheels last longer. And them being sealed is kind of a misnomer. They're technically not sealed, but they do have covers around them that add water resistance and don't necessarily make them waterproof. The reason why I point that out is because if you have a gate wheel that recesses into the closed position or open position and it is sitting in dirt and debris, well, it's a sealed wheel, but that dirt and debris has nothing but time and can break down the rubber seals around it and penetrate into that wheel. And I've seen it a million times. For the most part, I don't recommend maintaining the sealed wheels, and to a certain extent, once the cast iron grease wheels get to a certain point, I don't recommend maintaining those either. It's just a time versus cost of the actual part. So, you know, if you can get you a new part with a new warranty and it takes less time, labor is a factor in sometimes servicing this. And that's something that both, not only the technicians need to think about, but the property owners as well too. And this is to be done by a qualified technician, because this stuff, even just repairing it, can be dangerous. So I'm going to give you a tip there too in regards to roller wheels. So we're talking about R1 roller wheels. And you can look at these in any order. This just happens to be the way that I do it. Roller wheels. So what I'm going to do in order to take a look at those roller wheels to see if they're actually any good is I'm going to lift that gate up. I have a special modified jack that I actually use. And jack stands that I actually use, which are made for these types of situations. So not only do I lift it up with my jack and actually let it rest on my jack, I'll also put a jack stand underneath the gate. So you end up having a gate that's like this, and you have a jack underneath it that has a little handle like a 2-ton car jack, and then you also have a jack stand, what I call a jack stand. If you ever take one of my classes and we go through the truck, you'll actually see what those look like. They're very inexpensive to make, and they can benefit you in a number of ways just past this, helping you get the gate back on the track, helping you hold the gate up to do modifications on the track, those types of things. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually lift the gate up, and once I lift the gate up, I am, in general, looking at what that wheel's doing. If that wheel moves up or down as I'm lifting it up, as I'm lifting the gate up, and if it starts to sag down and gravity takes part of it and it doesn't go up with the wheel, we have a significant amount of wear. And at that stage, that in itself, whether it rolls smoothly or not, probably needs to be addressed. So if that's the case, I may actually even take the wheel off. What I'm going to do initially is jack the wheel up, take my hammer or some kind of device other than my fingers. I want to prevent my fingers from getting underneath the wheel and the track. Sometimes it mistakenly happens, and that's why I've got 2 is 1, 1 is none. I've got my jack stand that's going all the way down to the track. That's preventing the gate from falling. And then I've got my jack that's actually lifting up the gate as well too. So I've got, in essence, a dual system. And again, I have these things modified specifically for V-tracks, because that in itself, putting a 2-ton jack on that V-track, it's not stable. So you have to modify your jacks for that, and you have to use special jack stands. And if you take a class where we're doing gate operator quick start or gate operator intermediate, where we're putting on a gate operator, you will see that. And by the way, if you have not subscribed to the Finch University's newsletter to get updates on classes that we've got coming up, it's thefinchuniversity.com/subscribe. Shameless plug, right? But you'll find tips and tricks, and we'll start rolling out more, and then we'll also update you on these types of videos that get published through the month so you can actually see it. So when we're talking about roller wheels, R1, we're talking about these on the bottom. I'm going to lift that gate up. I'm going to support it with 2 different devices. So if it actually slips on one, it gets caught on the other. And then I'm going to take something, in essence, like I have a rubber mallet that's on my cart, something that will grip the side of the wheel. Hammer, back end of a hammer will do that. Grips the side of the wheel. And if you take a look at a V-groove wheel, this is what the wheel looks like when it's coming out of the box, if that's the configuration that you have. And I'm going to take my hammer, put it on the side, and I'm going to spin it. And when I spin it, it should keep rolling as though it still has a force behind it. That built up energy is going to keep it rolling. If I spin it and it stops, I've got a bolt that's too tight, I've got bearings that are worn out, I've got dirt and debris in the box, and so on. So that's R1, and that's how you test it. And this is a common failure point. 1, they don't get maintenance as much as they should. And 2, sometimes they're installed improperly. Wrong box, they're sitting in dirt and debris all day, and they don't get installed properly, or the gate doesn't get installed properly. So that's R1, so that's roller wheels. Now let's take a look at R2. R2 is guide rollers and cantilever wheels. So in this particular instance, this looks like a squiggly line, but this is a 2, and this is a 2. R2 is, in this particular case, where it's a gate operator that has guide rollers up top. They will look like, in this configuration, most of the ones that I would do, where they have a 6-inch guide roller on one side, 6-inch guide roller on the other. If you have a gate operator or a gate with an arch on top, sometimes you'll have like a 12-inch guide roller and then a 6-inch guide roller right below that. Not as common as straight flat top gates, but they are out there. So be cautious if you're just moving one guide roller, which is what I'm about to talk about. If you're moving one guide roller, you may have a guide roller on top of that as well too. So just because you see one of them spin doesn't mean that you're spinning the one that makes contact with this arching surface. So what I want you to do with the guide roller is, people call them pinch rollers. I call them guide rollers. They are guide rollers. They are not meant to pinch the gate. Although I didn't think about talking about that part of it, there needs to be a small amount of room in between the guide roller and the gate. So the gate's technically not going to be 100% vertically straight. It's actually going to lean on the guide operator. Maybe you can see it with a little bit of white. It's either going to lean a little bit this way from the guide roller or lean a little bit this way. But just about an 1/8 inch or a 1/4 inch clearance is sufficient. 1/4 inch is kind of nice because if that gate operator ever gets bent because a car hit it, it most likely, unless it's completely replaced, is going to have some kind of modification in there that will add to the width of the gate. So you want a little bit of room, not only just so they don't pinch on each other, because that adds resistance, and not only will it wear the gate operator out a little bit faster, but it might even wear the guide rollers. And the gate operator is really what we care about, but it might wear the guide rollers out a little bit quicker as well too. Adds resistance, causes additional heat in the motor that's not needed. Heat is the main cause of failure of electromechanical motors in this application. So we're back at R2, guide rollers and cantilever wheels. Guide roller, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that gate and I'm going to push it off of one guide roller along with a bunch of other safety precautions, but we're just talking about this for right now. Qualified technician should have the training to understand what precautions that you have to take when you're working on an automatic gate. I just wanted to throw that out there because I am kind of skipping. This is kind of like the middle of, not the middle, but this is like the second or third step. And there's some things that you need to do at the beginning to make sure that this gate operator is not going to open or close on you. And as a gate technician that's been doing this for approximately 20 years, that happens, and it can hurt you. So what I'm going to do with the gate, most gates that I deal with have a 2 or 3 inch frame. There's variations in there, but it's pretty common with the V-groove side gate that has a 2-inch frame or a 3-inch frame. Or in some states, wood is a little bit more popular. Louisiana, Texas, where wood's more popular. So not only will you have the thickness of a picket or 2 pickets and a little guide runner up top or top cap, you might have a little bit of width there. So it might not be directly on the gate. The guide roller might not be actually directly on the gate. It could be on wood on one side and metal on the other. But what we're looking for is that 1/4 inch gap. So I'm going to push that gate all the way up against one of those guide rollers and simply take my screwdriver or take my finger and spin that guide roller. Same exact principle. When you spin it, it should keep going. I am also listening as well too, because guide rollers can be kind of tricky. Pardon me, you can find a guide roller that rolls smooth, but the bearing is bad, it's sitting kind of funky, and at that stage we really need to address that, not only from a standpoint of the functionality of the guide roller once pressure is actually put back on it, because again, we're relieving pressure off of the guide roller in order to test it. Once you relieve that, or once you add pressure back to it, it actually could not roll as smooth, because now it's possibly metal on metal, or metal on a non-lubricated metal, like inside of a bearing or something like that, and it could cause additional resistance. So I'm going to do that with the other guide roller as well too. I'm going to push it up against one guide roller and then spin the other side, and if it continues to spin and I don't hear click, 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 and it spins well, then I would probably say that those are good guide rollers. But even though some people call them pinch rollers, and they may be in some catalogs calling pinch rollers, in essence, you don't want them pushing up against the gate equally, because that's exactly what they're doing. They're pinching, they're adding resistance. Resistance adds heat to the motor, additional heat that we don't want to apply to the motor. Heat is the number one failure for motors in this application. So that's R2 on a guide roller slide gate, and here's R2 on a cantilever slide gate. Forgot what gates we were talking about there for a second. For a cantilever slide gate. Now with the cantilever slide gate, it's a little bit different. And it's also a little bit easier because you don't have to do consistent pressure. Cantilevers, for the most part, are only rolling on two wheels at one time, okay? So in this situation right here, because the gate operator is in the middle, they're most likely just rolling, putting pressure on these two bottom ones, okay? So I could, in theory, test the two top ones and get that out of the way by spinning them. And if they continue to spin, probably pretty good. But the problem is that now leaves these bottom ones, and I'll never be able to relieve pressure off both bottom ones. I can only relieve pressure off both, just one at a time. So in this case, here's how I do it. I don't test the two tops at the same time. I'll push the gate all the way in one direction, and let's say we're going this direction. That will add pressure to this wheel and that wheel. And now I'll actually test this wheel and this wheel, and then the exact opposite. I'll push it in the opposite direction, and then I'll test these two wheels. But that's how the cantilever works. It's either on these two, or these two in general. There can be some that are a little bit tighter, but my experience has been that cantilevers don't have as much tolerance for bends and sharp bends, and things of that nature, like these type of slide gates where you only have one type of roller. And all it is in just the nature of having two pinches or two resistance points this far apart, because now you're getting to a situation where a bend or something like that could add pressure on both of them, whereas this guide roller doesn't experience as much resistance, because if the bend's here and you got a bend here, it doesn't matter because there's only one resistance point. But if you got a bend here and a bend here and a cantilever, it could make a difference. Now that's generally just what happens after they've been in service for a year. They get hit by cars, they get bent. You got a long enough cantilever gate, people forget this, in the heat of the day and hot Texas sun, that gate is going to actually bend a little bit. The good thing is when that's happening, it's bending in a nice smooth arc, and generally you don't have that much resistance. But you also have more surface area being touched in the cantilever wheels as well too. So now we'll take a look at R3. Again, we're talking about things that roll, and these are the three things that I want you to focus on when a qualified technician is mechanically addressing the gate operator. And again, we want you to be able to walk up to that gate when we're testing this type of resistance and lean up against it, and that gate should move. Now, ideally, everything's supposed to be flat, right? On a flat level surface. Doesn't happen like that in the real world. I'm sorry. It just doesn't happen. So you're not going to be able to push it uphill as easily as you are downhill. But if you pull the chain off of it and that gate starts to roll downhill just a little bit, then you know that it's probably actually going to be pretty easy to move in that one direction or the other. So that's what I'm looking for. I'm just looking for points of resistance. And if you push on it, you should be able to lean on it and push on it. There are heavier gates out there that are thousands of pounds, and all of that stuff adds resistance. So it's not every gate. I'm just talking about the majority of the gates that we deal with. And if you come across one of the bigger gates, 214-931-2626, low voltage professionals, automatic gate professionals, access control, fire professionals, all these guys that have to observe these gates and work with other companies to get these gates running on their systems, you're all more than welcome to call me 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And I will do what I can to help you out in regards to the physical aspect of it. You still have to know the local codes, safety, and all that stuff. And just because it's been adopted just because a particular code or standard has been adopted by the national or state type setup, these codes and standards organizations, just because a state or municipality has adopted a let's say national electric code, does not mean that everything in that book applies to what is on that property. The municipalities can modify those codes and standards, and I ran across that in a gate I was doing some consulting on when they were talking about the wire runs from the building out to the gate operator. Different soils, different conditions, different standards, heck, just different people want different things in different counties based on what their experiences are. So you can't just go by that. You need to know what the local municipality has. There's 20,000 cities, 4,000 special districts, 50 states. I can't be responsible for knowing all that stuff. I mean, if they changed one law a year, I would need to read 100 and something laws every single day just to be able to keep up with it, and it's just not practical. That's why you need to know what's going on in your area. Be aware. So anyways, just trying to make it lighthearted. I know this video is getting a little long, but hopefully people that are out there will just basically remember this, R3. That's what we're trying to get, is to have some kind of concept process for us qualified technicians to look like we know what we're doing in front of the customer, right? And I'm sure some end users, commercial properties, contractors, homeowners are gonna watch this too. And the important part for you is doing the work is very, very dangerous, could hurt or kill you, but you now know what to look for when a qualified technician comes to service your gate. You're gonna ask them about these three things. Did they take the chain off? Did they push the gate? Did they lift the wheels up? Does it still roll? And so on. So now let's take a look at R3, talking about things that roll. Well, roller chain, right? We see a lot of gates that break and people don't have money, they're not in town, they don't want to deal with it, they sold the house, they bought the house, hasn't been working for a while, and these chains, if they're not maintained, even though they're lubricated from the factory, they will rust up like that in certain conditions. I've had chains rust up overnight, brand new chains. So you got to be cautious of what that chain is actually doing. And now we're on R3. So this is a roller chain. This cantilever gate could very well have roller chain too. It could have rack and pinion system. But again, we're talking about R3, so we're just assuming that this has roller chain on it. Roller chain in most applications, although there's some gate operators that have them turned on their side and they're just fine, but I'm going to talk about most applications. Roller chain is going to most likely making contact with the gate operator at a minimum of 3 contact points. With the gate operator, like I said, you have your chain bracket down here and your chain bracket down here, and it can make contact with that as well too. So what you're seeing, all this is the inside of that gate operator. So this is a gear. This is a guide roller or chain roller, guide roller, different manufacturers call it different sayings. Idler wheel, idler pulley. Some of them, sometimes these have T's, sometimes they don't, so they may call it an idler gear. Generally this is metal 99.9% of the time. This is the actual gear. And what happens is, let's say this is back here, the chain comes in here, goes around this gear. This gear is what drives the actual gate, comes down here, and goes out that idler pulley. There are configurations where the operator's further back, where there may be a modified configuration where the wheel is down here and it does something else in a rear mount configuration. But this, in essence, is what you'll actually see inside the gate operator. 2 idler wheels and 1 drive gear. Well, I don't know what the math is, but it looks like to me it's almost doing 180 there. It's definitely doing more than 180 there and almost doing 180 there. And that is a lot of bending on that roller chain. And if that roller chain is stiff in any part of it that makes contact with this, what we could have happen is that what it does is it jumps one of these teeth. And the teeth in that gear and the chain staying in the same spot is what relates directly to how far it opens and closes in most circumstances. When you have a counter, like literally a counter, limit switch, and those types of setups, it definitely matters. There are some setups where they actually have sensors on the chain and a couple other different configurations where even if it were to skip the tooth, it actually wouldn't matter because the sensor on the chain is what's actually going to tell it where to stop and where to start. So this thing could go over the gear a million times. And when that chain gets rusted, it will rust in the position that it's in. Well, the position 9 times out of 10 is normally straight because back here in the gate operator, it's not exposed to the elements. And out here it actually is. And this is where it's straight, relatively straight. So you're going to get it to, if you will, rust or weld itself in that position. So when you take the chain off, it's going to be one straight piece. I have tons of pictures of it like that. And don't even try to get any use out of that chain when it's that bad. You just replace it because what's going to happen is you're going to shorten the life of the idler wheels, idler pulleys, and you're going to possibly shorten the life of the gate operator as well too because it's adding resistance to it. But going through here, there is a lot of bending, and that's why they call it roller chains because it's rolling through these things. There's a lot of bending. That's going on right there. So you got to be careful of if this thing's out in the elements for too long and they're not lubricating it. I apologize, I forgot to put my phone on silent. And they're not lubricating it, you could have an issue where it jumps the teeth. But I've seen it eat up these plastic pulleys. I've seen it do all kinds of things. And generally what you'll see, this is what happened with this tech call earlier. Generally what you'll see, or generally what you'll hear, this is what the complaint will be, is that the gate goes too far in one direction and not far enough in the other. And what has probably happened is one of these links that come in contact with this system has actually fused itself together via rust, and now is one solid chain, one solid piece, if you will. And what happens is, as opposed to it coming through here and bending naturally, it's going like this and coming through. Well, it's not making contact with all those gears, so it slips a gear. Now it's out of position, one direction, meaning it's going to go too far and not far enough in these respective directions, and you're going to get that complaint. In the closed position, if it's going too far, it's going to hit most likely what we call the latch post. And the open positions, most likely going to hit a physical stop back there. So that's what you'll see. However, the complaint can also sometimes be that when I come home, my gate is still open. This is one of my favorite. You know, my gate's open. So my neighbor has the same code to the remote as I do, something along those lines. And that does happen. We used to see it a lot more frequently a while ago than we do now. There's a lot of popular rolling code ones where it's very hard to duplicate one of your neighbor's remotes. But we see that. Well, what's happened when you get that phone call is the customer is using an automatic gate, and that automatic gate is supposed to work just like their garage door. When they click that button, it closes, and they've already driven away before it's all the way closed. So they're leaving, they hit the remote, the gate closes, hits the latch post, and then backs up. And then now it's could be locked down because it thinks that it actually hit something. So part of the safety mechanism tells it to stay open until you reset the gate operator. So that could be a complaint as well too. But generally, if it's just skipping a tooth or two, it'll hit that post, back up, and then it'll close again if it's on a timer, or you could click the remote to close it. Residential situations, most of them aren't on timers. Somewhere it's required that you actually have to have the timer on, but in a commercial setup, you have timers on generally most of the time. So that's R3. So what we're talking about is the physical obstructions with the devices that roll on the gate. Recap, R1, roller wheels, your V-groove roller wheels. On the bottom of the gate, lift them up, spin them. If they spin after you turn them, good to go. If not, bad bearing, obstruction in the wheel box, something to that, a tight bolt, something to that effect. Guide rollers and cantilever wheels. Cantilever wheels down here at the bottom, get them off the other wheel, get the pressure off the other wheel, spin it. If it keeps rolling, good to go. Actually, we didn't even talk about the chain, actually how to test that, but I'll do this one as on that recap. And then R2 with the guide rollers, get the pressure off the guide roller, spin it, if it keeps rolling, good to go. Now with the chain, it's actually pretty simple. Most of the time, in order to push this open and close and get an exact feel for how much resistance is in this system that works together, you're most likely going to be asked to take the chain off and push the gate open and close. And this is where it comes tricky for end users, and that's why we don't recommend you do it. You have to have a qualified technician to do it because it's got to go back on these teeth. We already talked about what can happen. So it's got to go back on these teeth. Well, what you do when you take the chain off is you walk down, you go down the whole chain and you just pick it up every couple of inches. And if it flops down on both sides, you're good to go. If you pick it up and 3 or 4 links come with it straight out, you've got a problem. And sometimes lubricating it just doesn't fix it. You just got to be willing to replace the whole chain. That's just the way that it is. Because if it's that bad now, and just lubricating it, it already has a bad foundation, and that's something to be concerned with. And chain's not that expensive. The service call for the technician to come back out, that's what's expensive, okay? I say that with conviction. You know, the labor is a big deal on it, because sometimes some of these parts to service or lubricate or maintenance them, you know, you're talking just a few dollars to do that, but you know, the time to get a truck out there, it costs money. So R3, roller wheels, guide roller cantilever wheels, and roller chain. So I've told you the basics of how to test all of them. I also recapped that I have the authority and recognition to help tech support some of this stuff for technicians. So there's my phone number, 214-931-2626, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Does that mean at 2 o'clock in the morning I'm going to answer your call? But no, you're getting first in line when I get your voicemail. Feel free to text that number as well too. As a matter of fact, there are going to be some prerequisites before you actually get help from me, such as testing voltage, testing these types of things before we actually get into what the stuff is. And I am going to require pictures. So if it's just randomly calling like, hey, I've got this gate on this one property that's doing it, there's not much I'm going to be able to do for you because my time is tremendously valuable and so is the customers, and you're just going to have to do some basic things in order for me to help you out. So there's my phone number. Now, you can't see it very well right here, but at the Finch University, we have TFU 100 and 101, and it talks about some of the pinch points on these. Now, I'm probably one of the fewer people that you want to talk to about entrapment areas and gate safety. I can read these just like you can, and I can check these areas off. But as far as the codes and the standards and all that stuff, I go by what's in the manufacturer's manual, and for the most part, follow those. So if you're looking for safety classes, probably American Fence Association, Tony Thornton, or one of those guys can actually do it. Maybe one of the manufacturers have classes for it, but I'm not the code guy. Unfortunately, I can't memorize what's going on in 50 states, 20,000 cities, and 4,000 special districts. I just can't do it. So you need to go to one of those guys to find out what your state's codes local municipality authority having jurisdiction is all about. But we have a basic free guideline. It's an interpretation of some standards, and it's our recommendations at the Finch University how to meet some of these entrapment standards. Again, finchuniversity.com, TFU 100, TFU 101, and it also has some gate safety, some company safety checklists for tailgate meetings and stuff like that. So I would highly recommend you check it out. It's free. So, and then the finchuniversity.com/subscribe, and you can keep up with all of our classes and what's going on, as well as updated videos. Like when we do a video like this, you can actually, you'll actually get it updated, like, hey, these are the new videos that we come out. So R3, just remember that when you send a technician out in the field and the customer says, hey, the thing's acting weird, these basic mechanical things along with basic electrical tests can actually get you half of this information that you actually need in order to eliminate that stuff and go on to the next one. So finchuniversity.com, thanks for listening to that. Remember R3, we're gonna keep them gates rolling.